My name is Rachel Anderson. At 32, I've come to understand how easily appearances can mislead. While my affluent relatives showcase their designer attire and luxury automobiles at our yearly family assembly, they remained blissfully unaware of the quiet empire I was constructing. Their whispers about my modest lifestyle and perceived poor decisions stung, until the day they crossed a significant boundary by publicly ridiculing my inability to acquire a home. Little did they comprehend, I held the deed to the very structure many of them called home. If you're viewing this, please share your location in the comments below. Give this video a like and subscribe to accompany me on this journey of satisfying vindication and financial liberty. Growing up, I witnessed my single mother meticulously manage every single dollar. Our small two-bedroom flat in a less desirable part of town was a stark contrast to the expansive residences my extended family inhabited within their exclusive communities. Mom juggled two jobs, her hands roughened by cleaning houses by day and serving tables at night, driven by a fierce determination to provide me with prospects she never had. Although we always had enough to eat, there was a constant awareness of our distinction from the rest of the Anderson lineage. My cousin Melissa would arrive at family gatherings in new designer ensembles each time, while I wore the same dress, accessorized differently, a technique my mother taught me to appear fresh without spending money we lacked. Uncle Robert, my father's elder brother, who inherited the family enterprise after my grandfather's passing, never missed an opportunity to lecture Mom that her financial difficulties stemmed from her poor choices. What they consistently failed to acknowledge was my father's abandonment when I was 3, leaving my mother to navigate debt and raise a toddler alone. Despite our circumstances, Mom instilled in me a powerful work ethic and financial acumen that would prove far more valuable than any inheritance. She emphasized diligent saving, prudent investment, and never equating net worth with self-worth. I worked part-time throughout high school, diligently saving every cent for university. While my cousins received new cars for their 16th birthdays, I relied on the bus and eventually bought a decade-old Honda with my own savings. The disparity in our lifestyles became acutely clear when I earned a scholarship to study finance at the state university. At family gatherings, my academic achievement was overshadowed by Melissa's acceptance to an Ivy League institution, entirely funded by her parents. After graduating, I encountered more obstacles than my privileged cousins could fathom. The global financial crisis coincided with my entry into the job market, leading me to drift between temporary positions for 2 years before securing an entry-level role at a local investment firm. During this period, the annual Anderson Family Conference became increasingly trying. Initiated by my grandfather to maintain connections within our growing family, the conference had devolved into a status competition, where attendees boasted about professional successes, vacation highlights, and recent luxury purchases. Aunt Patricia, who married into wealth and never held a job, would scrutinize my attire and accessories with a critical eye before remarking, for example, how commendable that you choose to shop at those discount retailers. Even my preference for renting a modest apartment, rather than overextending myself with a mortgage, became material for mockery. Renting is simply squandering funds, Uncle Robert would admonish, oblivious to my methodical strategy of building my savings. What my family did not realize was that I was living considerably below my means, saving over 60% of my income, while they accumulated debt to uphold their extravagant lifestyles. By age 28, I had amassed sufficient funds for a down payment on a small fourplex. I occupied one unit and leased the others, essentially residing rent-free while building equity. This initial investment property provided invaluable insights into building upkeep, tenant relations, and property management. I reinvested the earnings and persisted with my strategy of aggressive saving. Within 2 years, I acquired a second property, then a third. Each subsequent purchase became easier as my portfolio expanded. I established an LLC to manage my burgeoning real estate venture, operating under a corporate name rather than my own to safeguard my privacy. Concurrently, I maintained my day job, securing promotions and salary increases that further accelerated my investment capacity. My family remained ignorant of my accumulating wealth because I deliberately maintained my unpretentious lifestyle. I drove the same reliable car, wore simple yet good quality clothing, and never displayed symbols of status. Mom had succumbed to cancer the year after I purchased my first property, and I grieved not only her loss, but the fact that she never witnessed the fruition of the wisdom she had imparted to me. Her absence rendered family gatherings even more isolating, as she had served as my buffer and ally against their subtle cruelties. Cousin Melissa had followed her parents' lead, working in the fashion sector and meticulously documenting her lavish life on social media. Her spouse also came from privilege, and together they cultivated an image of flawless success. Uncle Robert continued to grow the family business, cultivating his persona as a business authority while treating his employees poorly. Aunt Patricia had assumed the role of the family's social arbiter, organizing charitable galas, not for philanthropic purposes, but for networking opportunities with other affluent families. They precisely embodied society's image of successful individuals. While I remained, in their view, the family's impoverished relative, by the time I reached 32, my real estate portfolio had grown substantially. I owned properties across 3 states and was earning more from my investments than from my full-time job, although I retained my position for health insurance benefits and to maintain appearances. The irony of my situation became striking when I discovered through public property records that several of my relatives resided in Westview Terrace, a luxurious apartment complex recently listed for sale. The building belonged to a development company facing bankruptcy, creating an opportunity for a shrewd investor. When I realized that Uncle Robert, Cousin Melissa, and several other family members all leased units in this building, while their permanent residences were under construction or renovation, I couldn't resist the perfect confluence of circumstances for a dose of poetic justice. The cream-colored invitation arrived in my mailbox one Tuesday, embossed with gold lettering, announcing the annual Anderson Family Conference at the Grand Wellington Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. I traced the raised letters, recalling the previous year's humiliating experience when Uncle Robert had publicly ridiculed my old car and offered financial assistance in front of everyone. The embarrassment had lingered for weeks. I nearly discarded the invitation but hesitated. This year felt different. My phone rang as I contemplated the invitation. It was Tanya, my closest friend since university, and the only person who truly grasped my complex relationship with wealth and my family. "Did you get the royal summons?" she inquired, knowing the invitations had been dispatched that week. "Just opened it," I replied, sinking into my sofa. The Grand Wellington, no less. Uncle Robert must be feeling particularly prosperous this year. Tanya's voice conveyed protective anger. "Are you considering going after last year's debacle? I wouldn't fault you for skipping it." Tanya had often been there to help me recover after many family gatherings, witnessing firsthand how their remarks chipped away at my confidence despite my financial achievements. "I'm considering it," I said slowly, an idea taking shape. "Remember that property I've been examining for the past few months, Westview Terrace? Didn't you mention it was beyond your budget?" Tanya asked. "The owner lowered the price last week. They're desperate to sell before facing foreclosure. And guess who I discovered lives there while their large houses are being built or renovated? Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, Cousin Melissa and her husband, and at least 4 other family members." The line went quiet as Tanya processed this information. "Rachel Anderson," she finally said, excitement creeping into her voice. "Are you thinking what I believe you're thinking? My LLC has already submitted an offer. If everything proceeds as planned, I'll own the building before the family conference next month." Oh my God, Tanya breathed. That's some serious power move energy. Are you absolutely certain you want to go through with this? I paused, considering the potential consequences. Was this vengeance or simply sound business? The property had solid financial fundamentals and fit perfectly within my investment strategy. The family connection was merely a coincidental bonus. It's a solid investment, I asserted firmly. The fact that it might finally earn me some respect from the family is simply a welcome bonus. The subsequent weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and negotiations. I collaborated closely with my real estate attorney to ensure every detail was handled meticulously, especially given the complexity of becoming the landlord to my own relatives. We structured the deal carefully, keeping my name off any documents they might encounter. With everything routed through my LLC, Anderson Investments, the name was conspicuously present, yet my family was too self-absorbed to make the connection. 3 days before the conference, I received confirmation that the transaction would close the following morning. I would officially own Westview Terrace, along with the long-term leases of 7 family members who had no inkling that their monthly rent payments would soon contribute to my wealth, rather than a faceless corporation's. The morning of the conference, I stood before my wardrobe contemplating my attire. In previous years, I'd attempted to blend in with department store approximations of designer clothing, always falling short of their expectations. This year, I chose differently. I selected a simple black dress from a sustainable brand, minimalist jewelry, and comfortable flats. I would no longer attempt to compete on their terms. I placed the final contract for Westview Terrace in my leather portfolio, alongside other investment documents. My phone buzzed with a text from my property manager, confirming the transfer of ownership was complete. It was official. I now held the deed to the roof over my relatives' heads. The drive to the Grand Wellington took 40 minutes from my modest neighborhood. I passed Westview Terrace en route. Its gleaming glass facade and meticulously landscaped entrance now belonged to me. A strange sensation washed over me, a blend of pride, apprehension, and something akin to power. I hadn't purchased the building to lord it over my family, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of finally possessing tangible proof of my success, achieved on my own terms. I used the valet service at the hotel, ignoring the barely concealed look of disdain from the attendant at my older model Honda. The lobby was opulent, adorned with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I immediately spotted cousin Melissa, holding court near the check-in desk, her designer handbag prominently displayed on her arm. She was speaking loudly about her recent trip to the Maldives, ensuring everyone within earshot knew the exclusivity of her resort. I tried to slip past unnoticed, but she caught my eye. "Rachel, you actually came," she exclaimed, appraising me from head to toe with thinly veiled judgment. "Love that dress. Is that from that new sustainable collection? So practical. To think about the environment."
Her tone left no doubt that practical was not a compliment.
Before I could respond, I overheard Uncle Robert's booming voice from across the lobby. "Who allowed their car service driver into the conference?" He joked to his golf companions, looking directly at me. "Oh, wait, that's just my niece." His friends chuckled as heat rose to my cheeks. This was precisely why I'd almost skipped this year. As I made my way toward the conference room, I passed more relatives engaged in what appeared to be a competition of consumption. Aunt Patricia was displaying her new diamond bracelet to her sister. My cousin Derek was detailing the features of his new European sports car. 2 of my younger cousins were comparing their upcoming exotic vacations. No one inquired about my life or seemed remotely interested in anything beyond outward appearances. I clutched my portfolio tighter, the weight of the documents inside bolstering my courage. Today, whether they realized it or not, the dynamic was poised to shift. For once, I possessed something none of them did: ownership of the very walls that provided them shelter. The Grand Wellington's Platinum Ballroom lived up to its name, boasting soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic city views. White-gloved servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres as family members greeted each other with air kisses and backhanded compliments. I accepted a glass of champagne and sought a quiet corner to observe the scene. My cousin Blake nodded in my direction but didn't approach. We had been close in childhood before status and money erected an invisible barrier. Now he was a corporate lawyer with the correct address and connections, firmly within Uncle Robert's sphere of influence. Aunt Patricia noticed me and made her way over, her Botoxed face attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rachel, darling, how are you?" she asked, giving me a quick once-over. "Still working at that little investment firm?" The way she pronounced little made it sound as though I were selling pencils on a street corner, rather than managing millions in assets for high net worth clients. "I am," I replied simply. "It's going well." She nodded absently, clearly uninterested in details. "And you're still in that apartment in what was that neighborhood called again?" "Forest Hills," I supplied. "Yes, actually, I'm quite content there." She patted my arm condescendingly. "Well, that's what truly matters, isn't it? Being satisfied with what you possess. Not everyone requires a 4-bedroom residence in Lakeview Heights, like Melissa just acquired. You were always the practical one." Before I could respond, Uncle Robert loudly clinked his glass, signaling the official commencement of the family conference. Everyone moved toward the large oval table at the center of the room, finding their assigned seats. I noted with annoyance that I had been placed between 2 empty chairs at the furthest end of the table, effectively isolated from the main conversation. Uncle Robert stood at the head of the table, chest expanded in his tailored suit. "Welcome, Andersons. Another year, another family conference. As the guardian of our family legacy, since my father's passing, I could not be prouder of how we have all continued to uphold the Anderson name in business and society." He launched into a self-important monologue about family prestige and accomplishments, dropping names of politicians and celebrities he had recently socialized with. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes, opting to sip my champagne instead. "Now, as is customary, let us proceed around the table and share our annual updates," Uncle Robert continued. "Melissa, why don't you begin?" Melissa straightened in her chair, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Well, as some of you may already know, Brandon and I just finalized the purchase of our dream home in Lakeview Heights. 5,000 square feet, pool, tennis court, the works. We're also renovating our apartment at Westview Terrace as an investment property once we relocate. Oh, and I was appointed creative director at Lux Magazine last month, so we celebrated with 3 weeks in Europe." The compliments and congratulations circulated around the table. Each family member vied to surpass the last with narratives of promotions, property acquisitions, luxury purchases, and exotic getaways. When my turn arrived, all eyes turned toward me with a mix of pity and curiosity. "I've been making some investments," I stated simply. "Nothing ostentatious, but I'm building for the future." Uncle Robert chuckled. "Always the cautious one. When will you embrace some risk, Rachel? That is how genuine wealth is created, not by hoarding small sums." The table erupted in condescending laughter. "I wager she's keeping it all in a savings account earning 0.5% interest," quipped my cousin Derek, who worked in finance but notoriously carried substantial credit card debt, according to family gossip. "Some individuals simply lack the innate ability for wealth accumulation," said Aunt Patricia with a dramatic sigh. "It's nothing to feel ashamed of, dear." I bit my lip, reminding myself that patience would make the eventual revelation all the sweeter. Then Melissa delivered the remark that would shift everything. "At the very least, tell me you're finally looking into real estate," she said, swirling her champagne. "Honestly, Rachel, at your age, still renting. It's as if you're allergic to building equity." I shook my head. "I am comfortable with my choices." "Goodness, that's truly disheartening," Melissa continued, seeking validation from the table. Can you imagine being 32 and unable to afford a house, while Brandon and I can barely decide which property to prioritize renovating first? The table rustled with suppressed laughter, and even those not actively participating smiled behind their napkins. Well, not everyone is born with financial literacy, Uncle Robert added with feigned sympathy. Some individuals simply require more guidance. Rachel, if you wish, I could arrange for my financial advisor to review your situation. Pro bono, of course, as family. A wave of anger surged from my chest to my face. For years, I had endured these taunts, assuring myself that their opinions were insignificant. But something inside me broke when I saw the genuine pity reflected in my younger cousin's eyes. The poor relative, the family charity case, the financial failure. None of them had the slightest idea that I could buy and sell most of them multiple times over. And now, with the Westview Terrace acquisition, I possess tangible proof of my success that even they could not dismiss. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, allowing the condensation to cool my fingers as I composed my thoughts. The room continued to buzz with self-congratulatory conversations, no one paying attention to my internal struggle. With careful movements, I reached for my leather portfolio and placed it on the table before me. Actually, I said, my voice softer than usual, but somehow cutting through the noise, I do have something I would like to share with the family. Uncle Robert looked irritated by the interruption to his carefully orchestrated event. Yes, Rachel. Did you overlook something during your update? His tone implied whatever I had to say could not possibly be important. I mentioned I've been making some investments. I continued, opening my portfolio and removing the Westview Terrace contract. I thought you might be interested in my most recent acquisition. Curiosity flickered across a few faces, although most continued their side conversations. Melissa checked her phone. Aunt Patricia adjusted her bracelet. Only my cousin Blake seemed genuinely interested, leaning forward slightly. As of yesterday morning, I said, my voice gaining strength, I am the new owner of Westview Terrace. The name hung in the air for a moment before recognition dawned. Uncle Robert laughed dismissively. Westview Terrace? The luxury apartment complex downtown? Don't be preposterous, Rachel. I slid the contract across the table toward him. Anderson Investments, LLC. That is my company.
I have owned it for 4 years now, along with 12 other properties across 3 states.
Westview Terrace is merely the latest addition to my portfolio. The room fell silent as Uncle Robert scanned the document, his face transitioning from amusement to confusion to outright disbelief. This cannot be correct, he muttered, flipping through the pages. Westview Terrace is worth millions. 27 million, to be precise, I replied calmly, although I negotiated them down to 22, given their financial predicament. Melissa's phone clattered onto the table. Wait, Westview Terrace? Our Westview Terrace? Where we reside. Her voice had risen an octave. Where you, Brandon, Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, Derek, Jason, and Linda all currently reside, I confirmed, naming all the relatives who rented there. Yes, that Westview Terrace. The silence was profound as the implications settled in. 7 members of my family, all of whom had variously mocked, pitied, or dismissed me over the years, were now my tenants. All those rent checks they wrote each month would now be deposited into my bank account. Aunt Patricia recovered first, her social training kicking in. Well, this is certainly surprising, Rachel. You've kept your success very quiet. Her tone suggested this was somehow disingenuous of me. I prefer to let my investments speak for themselves, I replied. Unlike some individuals, I do not measure my worth by what others think of it. Uncle Robert had moved from disbelief to anger, his face flushing. Allow me to see that, he demanded, snatching the contract from Melissa, who had been examining it with wide eyes. This must be some sort of error or practical joke. I produced additional documentation from my portfolio. Property deed, transfer of ownership, current rent rolls, maintenance records, bank statements. No mistake, Uncle Robert. I own the building where most of you live. I hadn't intended to disclose the full scope of my portfolio, but the momentum carried me forward. I also own the office complex, where Brandon's architecture firm leases space, 3 commercial properties downtown, and residential buildings in Chicago and Austin. My net worth currently stands at just over $60 million, and I have achieved all of this without anyone's assistance or connections. The room erupted in pandemonium. Uncle Robert insisted the documents were forgeries. Melissa vacillated between shock and attempts to suddenly portray us as fellow real estate investors. Derek demanded to know how I had accumulated such wealth in secret. Aunt Patricia looked as though she might swoon. Only Blake smiled slowly at first, then broke into unrestrained laughter. "This is the most incredible thing I have ever witnessed," he declared, raising his glass in my direction. To Rachel, who just demonstrated to all of us the art of genuine wealth creation while we were preoccupied buying sports cars and posting vacation photos. Uncle Robert turned on him. "This is not amusing, Blake. She has deliberately misled the family." "Misled?" I challenged, finding my voice growing stronger with each word. "By what measure? I never lied about my financial situation. You all simply assumed I was struggling because I did not flaunt designer labels or boast about luxury vacations. Not once did any of you actually inquire about my investments or financial strategy. You were too preoccupied with yourselves." I stood up, gathering my documents. "The irony is that while you were all looking down on me for being financially illiterate, I was building real wealth and financial independence. And now I am your landlord." Melissa's husband, Brandon, who had been conspicuously silent, finally spoke up. "Does this imply you will be increasing our rent?" The naked self-interest in his question, after everything that had just been revealed, spoke volumes. "I will be reviewing all leases and property operations with my management company," I replied coolly. "All decisions will be made based on market conditions and property performance, not personal relationships." I looked around the table, meeting each person's gaze directly. "I did not purchase Westview Terrace because you all reside there. I purchased it because it was a sound investment offering strong returns. The fact that you are my tenants is merely a coincidence, albeit an illuminating one." Uncle Robert had recovered sufficiently to attempt damage control.
"Well, this is certainly unexpected," he said, forcing a jovial tone into his voice.
"But of course, we are all immensely proud of your success, Rachel. It's quite impressive, truly. You really should have informed us sooner." "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have dismissed it as improbable because it did not align with your preconceived narrative about me?" His silence provided the answer. The elegant ballroom, moments before filled with superficial harmony, now resembled the aftermath of an explosion. Family members huddled in small groups, whispering frantically while casting furtive glances in my direction. The power dynamic had shifted so dramatically that no one seemed quite certain how to proceed. Uncle Robert attempted to call the meeting back to order, his authoritative voice now tinged with uncertainty. "Let us all take a moment to compose ourselves," he announced, straightening his tie as if physically adjusting his dignity. "We still have family matters to discuss, but the damage was done. No one was interested in the carefully planned agenda any longer. All eyes were on me, reassessing years of interactions through this new lens." Melissa abandoned her usual composure, rushing over to my side with an ingratiating smile. "Rachel, sweetie, I always recognized your financial acumen," she gushed, placing her hand on my arm. "Remember when we were children and you always saved your allowance while I spent mine immediately? I really should have taken notes." I gently but firmly removed her hand. "Funny, I recall you calling me cheap and boring for that exact behavior." Her smile faltered, but she persisted. "Children say the most foolish things. I've consistently admired your discipline. And now look at you, a real estate magnate. We simply must get lunch soon. Compare investment strategies. Brandon and I are also looking to expand our portfolio. I noticed Brandon across the room frantically texting, likely checking the terms of their lease at Westview Terrace. Aunt Patricia approached next, her recovery complete and social engineering in full swing. Rachel, darling, this is simply marvelous news. You know, I always told Robert you possessed a keen business mind, just like your grandfather. Exceptionally clever, keeping it quiet, building your empire behind the scenes. Her revisionist history was breathtaking in its boldness. Did you? I must have missed those expressions of confidence over the years of being referred to as poor Rachel behind my back, I replied, maintaining a steady voice. Aunt Patricia's face tightened slightly. Well, I never used those exact words, she backpedaled. We were simply concerned about your future. Uncle Robert finally abandoned his attempt to resume the meeting and marched over, his expression a complex mixture of anger and calculation. A private word, Rachel, he said, gesturing toward a quiet corner of the room. I followed, maintaining a safe emotional distance. What exactly is your strategy here? He demanded, once we were out of earshot. If this is some sort of retribution, because you felt slighted over the years, it is exceedingly unprofessional. I met his gaze steadily. There is no strategy, Uncle Robert. I am a real estate investor who made a sound business decision. The fact that you and others happen to be tenants in my building is coincidental. Although I won't deny it adds a certain poetic justice to the situation. You could have informed us about your success before blindsiding everyone like this, he insisted. We are family. Would you have done the same? I countered. Or would you have used the information to your advantage, as you are attempting to do now? He had no response. Our conversation was interrupted by my cousin Emma, Uncle Robert's youngest daughter, and one of the few relatives I had always gotten along with. Unlike her siblings, she had never participated in the family's materialistic competitions. That was incredible, she whispered, giving me a quick hug. Dad's head nearly exploded. I've never witnessed anything like it. Her genuine delight was refreshing amidst the calculated responses of the others. As I navigated the room, I noticed the family had naturally divided into factions. Those who had been the most vocal in their judgment of me over the years were now huddled defensively, while those who had been kinder or simply less interested in status began approaching me with genuine curiosity about my business. My grandmother, who had been quietly observing from her seat at the table, motioned for me to join her. At 86, she remained sharp as ever, although she rarely intervened in family politics. Come sit with me, Rachel, she said, patting the chair beside her. I complied, feeling suddenly weary from the emotional exertion of the confrontation. Your grandfather would have adored this, she said, her eyes twinkling. He built his business the same way, you know. Quietly, methodically, allowing results to speak louder than words. I hadn't expected this revelation. I thought Grandpa was always successful, even from the beginning. She chuckled softly. That's the story Robert prefers to tell. The truth is, your grandfather started with nothing and built everything through smart decisions and hard work. Robert inherited a successful business and has been riding that wave ever since. She squeezed my hand. You remind me of him more than any of the others. He would be proud. Her words held more significance than all the backpedaling and sudden respect from the others combined. As the initial shock subsided, practical questions began to emerge. Derek approached cautiously, his earlier mockery replaced with a business-like efficiency. So concerning the building management, will you be changing companies or procedures? It was the first legitimate question anyone had asked. I will be reviewing operations over the next few weeks, I replied. My priority is maintaining the property's quality while ensuring it remains profitable. Good tenants who pay on time and respect the property have nothing to be concerned about. The implied message was not lost on him or anyone listening. After 2 hours of navigating this new family landscape, I found myself emotionally drained. The satisfaction of finally being recognized had been sweet initially, but was now yielding to a complex mix of emotions. I required space to process. I made my way to Uncle Robert, who was still attempting to maintain his patriarchal position at the head of the family. "I will be departing now," I informed him. "I have an early meeting tomorrow with my property management team." The implication that we would be discussing Westview Terrace was not lost on him. "Rachel, I sincerely hope this revelation does not alter the fundamental nature of our family relationships," he said stiffly. "I know things haven't always been perfect, but we remain family." I considered his words carefully before responding. "You are correct. We are family, but from now on, that relationship will include mutual respect. I have earned it." I gathered my belongings and offered my goodbyes, disregarding the numerous attempts to draw me into further conversation. As I waited for the valet to retrieve my car, I caught sight of my reflection in the hotel's mirrored wall. I appeared exactly the same as when I had arrived, yet everything had changed. The cool evening air provided a welcome relief. After the emotional intensity of the conference room, I slid behind the wheel of my Honda, the car I had been mocked for keeping, despite my financial ability to upgrade many times over. Now it felt like a symbol of achievement, rather than a source of shame. As I pulled away from the Grand Wellington, my phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, and voicemails poured in from family members who suddenly had pressing matters to discuss with their previously invisible relative. I silenced the phone and concentrated on the road ahead, my mind replaying the events of the afternoon like a film I couldn't pause. The drive home became a journey through my emotions, rather than merely city streets. Initial triumph yielded to more complicated feelings as the adrenaline subsided. Yes, I had finally shattered their misconceptions about me. But at what cost to relationships that, despite their flaws, were still part of the fabric of my life? My decision to remain in my modest apartment, despite my wealth, suddenly made perfect sense. This was a sanctuary, a place untouched by family drama or pretense. I kicked off my shoes at the door and sank onto my comfortable, well-worn couch. The first person I called was Tanya. "Well," she answered eagerly. "Did you drop the bombshell? How did they react?" I laughed, the day's tension easing slightly. It was precisely the earthquake you'd imagine. One minute, I was poor Rachel, who couldn't afford a house. The next, I was everyone's favorite successful relative they'd always believed in. I recounted the highlights of the confrontation, from Uncle Robert's disbelief to Melissa's immediate attempt at networking. "Good heavens, they sound like cartoon villains," Tanya said when I finished. "Are you okay, though? Genuinely?" The question struck me harder than anticipated, and I felt tears welling up. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me feels validated, as though I finally stood up for myself after years of subtle degradation. But another part feels sad, like, why did it take revealing my net worth to earn their respect? And do I even desire relationships that are conditional on financial status? Tanya was quiet for a moment. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or in your case, the $60 million question," she added with a gentle laugh. "You've exposed a painful truth about your family dynamic. Money shouldn't define someone's worth, but for many of them, it clearly does. The question now is what kind of relationships you wish to rebuild, if any." As we spoke, I scrolled through the messages inundating my phone. Most were transparent attempts to reposition themselves favorably in light of my revealed wealth. Uncle Robert had sent a formal-sounding text about being proud of my entrepreneurial spirit and suggesting we discuss synergies between our business interests. Melissa had already extended invitations to 3 different social events, where I would meet the right kind of people. Aunt Patricia desired to feature my inspiring success story at her next charity gala. The naked self-interest was almost comical in its transparency. However, there were a few messages that felt genuine. My grandmother had sent a simple text. "You stood your ground with grace. Lunch next week?" Emma inquired if I wanted to grab coffee and hear about her new nonprofit work. with no mention of Westview Terrace or my wealth. Blake sent an emoji of a microphone dropping with the message, "Most entertaining family conference ever. Respect." These messages felt like potential bridges to more authentic connections. After saying goodnight to Tanya, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, contemplating my mother. She had passed away before my investments began to truly flourish, but she had laid the foundation for everything I had accomplished. I could almost hear her voice. Money doesn't make you superior to anyone else, Rachel. It simply provides you with more opportunities. The true measure of wealth is what you choose to do with those opportunities. Mom had never been vindictive. Even when the family treated her poorly after Dad left, she maintained her dignity without becoming bitter, a balance I was still learning to achieve. The weight of being a landlord to my own family members suddenly felt heavy. I now possessed the authority to make their living situations comfortable or challenging. I could increase rents to market rates immediately when leases renewed, or I could be accommodating. I could prioritize their maintenance requests or delay them. But weaponizing my position would render me no better than they had been when they held social power over me. I made a decision then, sitting in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the modest comforts I had chosen for myself. I would treat my relatives exactly the same as any other tenants. No favoritism, but no retribution either. Fair market rates, responsive maintenance, professional interactions. My property manager would handle most direct communications to maintain appropriate boundaries. I would not use my position to punish or reward, but would simply operate my business ethically. As for personal relationships, those would need to be rebuilt on new foundations of mutual respect, if they were to continue at all. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to my property management company regarding the Westview Terrace acquisition, specifically noting that several units were occupied by my relatives and establishing clear protocols for handling those relationships professionally. I scheduled a meeting for later in the week to review all leases and property operations. Once business was addressed, I redirected my attention to the personal fallout. I would not respond to most messages tonight. Emotions were running too high, and I needed time to process my own feelings before engaging with theirs. I did send quick replies to my grandmother, Emma, and Blake, accepting their invitations for future conversations. These connections felt worth preserving and potentially strengthening in the aftermath of today's revelation. As midnight approached, I prepared for bed with a profound sense of liberation. For years, I had carried the burden of my family's misconceptions and judgments. While I had never doubted my own choices, their collective disapproval had still affected me more than I cared to admit. Now that weight was gone, replaced with the responsibility of navigating this new landscape, where I was suddenly visible, respected, and in some instances, feared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, from managing newly complicated family dynamics to integrating Westview Terrace into my existing portfolio. But tonight, for the first time in years, I would sleep without the shadow of being the family's poor relation looming over me. That alone felt like wealth beyond measure. 6 months elapsed quickly, each day bringing small adjustments to my new reality. The family ecosystem, disrupted by my revelation, gradually settled into a different pattern, much like a forest regenerating after a necessary fire. Some relationships withered, while others blossomed in unexpected ways. The annual family conference underwent the most dramatic transformation. Uncle Robert reluctantly conceded that after 30 years of hosting, perhaps it was time for new blood to take over the tradition. When no one else volunteered, I offered to host, proposing we redirect the gathering toward genuine connection rather than status competition. My first action was relocating it from the Grand Wellington to my recently acquired lakeside property, a rustic yet comfortable venue that emphasized natural beauty over opulence. Winter sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as I finalized the arrangements before guests arrived. Tables were set with elegant simplicity, Name cards deliberately interspersed family factions to discourage the usual cliques from forming. A photograph of my grandfather stood at the entrance, alongside a quote from him I had discovered in his old journals. Success isn't measured by accumulation, but by contribution. Tanya arrived early to provide moral support. Nervous? She asked, helping me adjust a centerpiece. Surprisingly, no, I replied. For the first time, I feel like I'm engaging with my family on authentic terms. Whether it goes well or not, at least it's real. The first to arrive was my grandmother, her eyes approving as she observed the transformation of the family gathering. He would have loved this, she said, nodding toward my grandfather's photo. The view, the simplicity, the focus on people rather than pretense. Uncle Robert arrived next with his wife, their demeanor noticeably subdued compared to previous years. Our relationship had been strained but civil since the revelation. As the landlord to their temporary residence, I had maintained strictly professional interactions, neither punitive nor preferential. When their permanent home was finally completed 3 months after our confrontation, they moved out of Westview Terrace with minimal communication. Rachel, he greeted me with a nod that fell somewhere between grudging respect and lingering resentment. Lovely property. Thank you, Uncle Robert, I replied warmly, determined not to perpetuate old patterns. I'm pleased you could attend. As other family members arrived, I observed the subtle shifts in how they approached me. Gone were the condescending remarks about my career or lifestyle choices. Instead, there was an awkward deference that, while preferable to disdain, still did not constitute genuine connection. Only a handful engaged with authentic interest in my life beyond my financial status. Emma had become a regular presence in my life. Our monthly coffee dates had evolved into a genuine friendship. Unlike her siblings, she asked questions about my business strategies not for personal gain, but out of genuine curiosity. In turn, I became a supporter of her nonprofit work, providing both financial backing and strategic advice. Blake and I had rekindled our childhood closeness, our shared discomfort with family politics, fostering a natural alliance. He had recently launched his own business, declining his father's offer of a position in the family company, a decision I wholeheartedly supported with both encouragement and angel investment. Most surprising was my developing relationship with Melissa's 13-year-old daughter, Lily. Following the revelation, she began emailing me questions about investing. Having secretly started a small stock portfolio with her allowance, our correspondence evolved into mentoring sessions, where I taught her the financial literacy her parents had never prioritized. When lunch was served, I stood to address the family, acutely aware of how different this felt from my position at the far end of the table 6 months ago. Welcome, everyone. Before we eat, I wanted to share a few thoughts about the purpose of our gathering today. For many years, this annual conference centered around achievements and acquisitions, measuring success in square footage and luxury brands. A few uncomfortable shifts occurred in seats around the room. Today, I'd like us to attempt something different. Under each of your plates, you will find a card with a question. After we serve the main course, I invite each of you to read your question aloud and share your answer. These are not about material success, but about life experiences, lessons learned, and moments that have shaped you. The meal progressed with initial awkwardness, giving way to hesitant engagement. When the time arrived for the questions, something remarkable transpired. My usually stoic Uncle Philip spoke movingly about his greatest regret, working so excessively that he missed his children growing up. Cousin Derek, typically focused solely on financial conquests, revealed his lifelong dream of becoming a teacher before family pressure steered him toward banking. Aunt Patricia shared vulnerability about her insecurity driving her social climbing. Even Uncle Robert, when his turn came, offered unexpected insight. My question asks about the most significant lesson I have learned this year, he said, clearing his throat. I suppose It would be that I have conflated net worth with self-worth for most of my life, measuring myself and others by financial yardsticks rather than character. Recent events have prompted me to reassess that approach. His eyes met mine briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between us. As the afternoon unfolded, I observed my family members relating to each other with gradually increasing authenticity. Not everyone participated fully, and old habits occasionally resurfaced, but the shift was undeniable. When most guests had departed, I found myself on the deck overlooking the lake with my grandmother and Tanya. "You've altered the family dynamic," my grandmother observed, "not merely by disclosing your success, but by how you've managed the aftermath." "I'm still navigating it," I admitted. "Some relationships may never fully recover. Uncle Robert and I are civil at best. Melissa still treats me like a networking opportunity, rather than a cousin. But others have surprised me." She nodded wisely. "Wealth is a magnifying glass. It does not fundamentally change who people are. It simply makes their true natures more apparent. The ones worth keeping in your life are those who recognized your worth before knowing your net worth." Her words crystallized something I had been feeling but couldn't articulate. Financial success hadn't created my problems with certain family members. It had simply exposed existing dysfunctions while simultaneously creating space for healthier connections to form. In the months since the revelation, I had expanded my real estate holdings, but more significantly, I had expanded my definition of wealth. True richness stemmed from relationships built on mutual respect, from utilizing resources to create positive impact, and from the freedom to define success on my own terms, rather than through the expectations of others. The sun began to set over the lake, casting golden light across the water. "What is next for you?" Tanya asked, sensing my reflective mood. "Professionally, I am exploring impact investing, particularly in affordable housing. Personally, I am learning that setting boundaries does not equate to severing ties, and that forgiveness does not necessitate forgetting." I watched a pair of birds soar across the darkening sky. Primarily, I am striving to build a life where my net worth and my self-worth exist in separate categories, each valuable in its own right. As twilight settled around us, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for this journey, complex as it had been. The family that had once diminished me had inadvertently propelled me toward creating abundance on my own terms. The ultimate irony was that in labeling me poor, they had revealed their own poverty of understanding about what genuinely constitutes wealth. What is your definition of true wealth? Is it measured in dollars and cents, or something more profound? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of personal growth and unexpected triumphs. Thank you for joining me today. And remember that sometimes the greatest power originates from quietly building your own success rather than seeking validation from others.